Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here, and I bet you thought I was done after that whole Cetra rant, right? Well, the end times isn't just about the undead, and I have another legendary lord in my sight that is in need of some missing goodies when they made the harrowing journey to Total War. Among the various hordes of chaos, there is one lord that stands out from the rest due to being far weaker than he has any right to be. For when the apocalypse is at hand, it's critical that all of its most dangerous architects are properly empowered. So, prepare for mutation and madness, as we'll be focusing on the god of mutation himself, Morghur the Shadowgave. For those unaware, Morghur is far more than he initially appears, especially when considering the rather unfortunate lacking design that he received in Total War. Who gave the ultimate mutating horror himself, like the best horror villain, just regular goat legs. I mean, look at his miniature. His miniature is like got that super cool, like his lower body's all messed up and mutated. Anyway, whatever. Sinather, the Corruptor, as he's known to the elves, is in truth an unspeakably powerful god of corruption and chaos that seeks to force his presence into the mortal realms of reality itself. The nightmarish reality warping that constantly follows his presence is the result of this, an impossibly vast spirit from the ether attempting to assert its insane understanding of what reality should be upon the fraying real space around it. Most of this is represented well enough in game. Morghur is in truth a fairly powerful character that is the bane of anyone with the misfortune to accidentally wander within Crapclaw distance. Yet there are ultimately 4 key tools that remain missing from his kit as the one true god of the Beastmen. Funny enough, there was actually an original version of Morghur back in the elder days of Total War Warhammer 1 when he first emerged from the darkness of the deep forest alongside the Realms of the Wood Elves DLC. If you actually go back and play the old Wood Elf exclusive campaign that you can still encounter, you'll find the original concept during, I think it's the Silver Spire quest battle, which is the finale of that particular mini campaign, where he's a nigh invulnerable, unbreakable bastard that requires exceptional care to take down due to the unique gimmicks he's granted in the battle to make him the challenge that he frankly ought to be. Now, while some of those abilities were exclusive to his role as the big campaign finale antagonist, there were a few abilities that were stripped from him for balance reasons at the time that I think nowadays we can restore, because the game is just a lot more sophisticated and the power level of characters has gone much higher up, and Morghur can afford to be what he was in the tabletop as opposed to what he's been kind of downgraded to in Total War Warhammer. So first and foremost among these is that Morghur should regain his unbreakable status. In every single version of the character that was ever put to paper for Warhammer Fantasy, which was 6th and 7th edition respectively, Morghur has always been unbreakable as a baseline. While I can understand that this may be too powerful for multiplayer custom battle stuff, it's more than reasonable for him to have it baseline as one of his starting lord effects for his Shadowgave trait, or as a skill on his skill tree that starts the campaign unlocked automatically at level 1. He's an utterly insane monstrosity that doesn't care whether he lives or dies, as he's genuinely immortal and his perception of reality is so absurdly distorted that he is quite literally incapable of fearing anything. I mean, they even went overboard redundancy with most of his rules of saying that he's unbreakable and immune to psychology and hates everything because he's just such a bastard. So, there's the first piece of the tentacled and undulating Morghur pie. Give the poor guy his baseline unbreakable status back, as is only proper. Next up, we have another ability that most of you likely are not aware of, but paints a rather fun picture of this Beastie Boy's abilities. In his original, far more iconic form during 6th edition, when Morghur made his debut, he possessed an incredibly powerful ability known as the Beast Roar. Described as a piercing, unearthly, and warping roar that resounds through the forest, this Call of the Gave spawn draws beastmen of all types scurrying to his side as they're compelled at the deepest levels to protect their unholy master. In tabletop, this ability would cause all fleeing beastmen on the entire table to immediately rally without needing to roll, which is an exceptionally powerful ability. He could only do it once per battle, which may be possible to convert over as designed into Total War, though the ability could be a little too strong. Beastmen are quite prone to fleeing, that's kind of one of their only major downsides, and a legendary lord who has the ability to auto-rally all of them over the battlefield ain't nothing to sneeze at. That can be quite powerful. Obviously, if a unit is shattered, it won't affect them, but if you have a unit that's merely routed or merely fleeing, he should have the ability, at least once, to just, you know, get them together. I mean, ultimately, this should be a fairly easy ability to adapt into the game now, because we have characters like Sea Lord Island who have brought auto rally effects into the game. That's a thing now. We have like a whole mechanic for auto rallying fleeing units. So whether it's map wide or something like a 50-meter AoE radius, I would say let's give Morghur his voice back and implement the Beast Roar upon his skill tree. Probably would be fine in multiplayer as an ability, so long as it was properly limited in use/scope. So, you know, I would say it'd probably be fine as a once per battle ability for single player and multiplayer. Though I will leave it up to the multiplayer community to hash that out. If they're like, no, it needs to be single player only, then I'm not going to argue with them. I just think that would make like a really nice, you know, level 5, level 10 skill tree ability. Anyway, moving on from abilities, there are 2 items that need to be discussed for old Gordoom, as the Dawi referred to him. The first one is admittedly a bit of a technicality, though I still think it's worth discussing. In Total War, Morghur currently only has the singular item named the Stave of Ruinous Corruption, which, interestingly enough, is not actually an item that Morghur has ever had in any of his iterations. That is completely unique to Total War. It's something that Total War ultimately made up, though the reason for this is actually explained back in Warhammer 1 and I think Warhammer 2, whenever you actually had to go through the quest lines to get unique items. There was a point where people got really sick of constantly having to do the quests over and over and over again whenever they would play campaigns, so Creative Assembly just decided to get rid of the quest lines and made it where when you hit the appropriate level you can just immediately do the quest battle. So they got rid of massive amounts of lore text which used to go along with these, which I really personally miss. I loved the quest lines, but I think I was one of like 6 people that liked them, and I understand I'm in the minority on that one. But in any event, for Morghur's quest line, they actually explain that the Stave of Ruinous Corruption is essentially an item that was 2 items combined in the tabletop, which for the tabletop in the rules was known as the Braystaff of Morghur and the Stones of the Skull Cave. Being rather unusual, but not unheard of, this combined set of items, the lore tidbit tells us the following. The Twisted Braystaff of Morghur is a potent talisman of chaotic power when combined with the power of the Stones of the Skull Cave, and it writhes constantly as if a living thing. These 2 items together make the winds of chaos ever more unstable and dangerous, and can turn the deadly winds against those attempting to manipulate its powerful essence. Now, in Total War, they took this item, which was a singular item called the Braystaff of Morghur and the Stones of Skull Cave, which is a lot of text, and they condensed it into the much less wordy Stave of Ruinous Corruption, which is fine. That's totally fine. I have no problem with that. It kept part of the original rule, which is that if a wizard miscast, they would just immediately turn into a chaos spawn, which is hilarious, and also would make your opponent probably start crying in frustration. But that was reinterpreted in Total War to the Stave of Ruinous Corruption just summons a unit of chaos spawn, which is totally fine. However, they did lose a critical component of the item, which was the other anti-spellcaster component. In tabletop, this technically it would count as a weapon, made wizards terrified to cast with Morghur on the tabletop, not only because they could pop into chaos spawn, but because he was quite capable of unraveling enemy spells as if a fairly competent wizard himself. Gave you a good amount of dispel dice. So to rectify this, I would recommend having the Stones of the Skull Cave, which for anyone that doesn't know is actually the name of any cave that Morghur comes to take residence in, because his continued presence within like a rocky cave fills the rocks around him with so much corruptive magic that the walls start to flow like hot wax, and the stone itself constantly shifts and alters in horrific ways. But anyway, so we should have the Stones of Skull Cave made either into its own unique item, which could be a talisman unique item, or perhaps it could just be a skill on his skill tree. That they did this with like the Fey Enchantress, where the Fey Enchantress has some of her iconic items like the golden girdle was made into a skill tree thing instead of it being an item. But regardless of how it's added, I think it'd be nice to have it be something that just debuffs enemy wizards. So something that could perhaps reduce enemy Winds of Magic reserve of armies in the same region or province as him by like -5 or -10 could work really well, or something that just notably increases miscast chance to enemy wizards on the battlefield. Maybe it just lowers enemy power reserve recharge rate on the battlefield with him. Just something to give that flavor of destabilizing magic to mess with the spellcasting foes. Finally, that takes us to the most important literal item on this list. You may not be aware of this, dear listener, but one of the most common and popular titles for Morghur is the Master of Skulls. Have you ever wondered what that's about? Well, allow me to unveil the truth of the matter. Morghur is genuinely one of the freakiest creatures in the Warhammer world, and this moniker is at the heart of just why that is. This horny devil is covered in skulls, woven into his absurd amount of hair and hanging from his horns, along with stacks and stacks of them lining wherever he takes up residence, which will become known as the Skull Cave. But these aren't just a visual gag or Warhammer's obsession with skulls, because man, does Warhammer love having skulls everywhere. For the Shadowgave is their master, and even death is no escape from the warping madness of Morghur. The skulls scream, shrieking without end, and crying out in tongues both known and forgotten. This is incorporated into the iconic item known as the Skull Weave. The skulls woven into Morghur's hair and horns gibber and screech constantly. While this is regarded with awe and respectful fear by the Beastmen, it evokes terror and mind-numbing horror in all others who encounter Morghur, often sending them insane, condemned to hear the horrific chatter for the rest of their lives. As one can imagine, this item grants Morghur the Cause Terror rule. In addition, all those screaming skulls are a tad distracting and make Morghur harder to hit in close combat, as they disorient those trying to take on a god-made flesh. For Total War, these would make a perfect, unique enchanted item slot for Morghur, granting him the Terror passive, which bizarrely he doesn't already have naturally through any method, so let's give him Terror, and also perhaps giving him let's say 20 to 30 meter passive aura that lowers the melee attack of enemies, let's say so long as Morghur's himself in close combat. I think it'd be fair to have the close combat requirement on it so it's not too strong, just adding to the miserable bastard's survivability. If we acquire all 4 of these traits for Morghur, I really think he'd land in a wondrous spot to be the true threat that he ought to be as we prepare for the end times. Just like with the Cetra video, I would deeply appreciate if y'all would consider carrying this video on the winds to whatever forums, Discord channels, or subreddits you would find appropriate. In any event, I believe that's it for all the characters I'll be covering for right now. At some point, I need to get around to making a big video discussing just completely reworking the Demons of Chaos along with Be'lakor, but that's for another day. I would like to take this moment to thank you all so much for watching. A special shout out to those supporting me over on Patreon for your continued kindness and helping me keep the lights on. In any event, as a final random note, if you'd like to learn more about Morghur and you're kind of intrigued by maybe some of the little tidbits I dropped about him today, why not consider clicking on some video that will probably appear on screen right around this time to check out the Lorebeards episode where Andy Law and I delve into all of the history, lore, and the possible truths behind his nature. Thank you all again so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be in the world. Take care.